Let me start off by saying thank you very much for joining me this evening. I am very grateful, and I hope that I can be helpful to you all. I want to start by saying, typical mom life, I was a little bit late because my darling daughter decided to offer my services to drop one of her friends at home. So had to do a bit of a run to get here. But hopefully it will all flow smoothly and you guys can get the best out of it. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Debbie. I am a kids life coach. I have been working for nearly 20 years with kids. I have worked with special needs kids, and then I ran a nonprofit organization for nearly 10 years where I worked with a lot of underprivileged kids. And then after that, I've worked in mainstream schools in sort of affluent areas, and then found myself working out that education is amazing and we definitely need it, but what we do need more, I think, is emotional intelligence for our kids, because I think they're under a lot of pressure to go through a lot of obstacles in life. I don't think COVID helped. You know, there's pressures with parents having dual incomes and salary reductions and all of those sorts of things that roll off into the kids. So you know, there's a lot that our kids have to manage, never mind the pressures that they put under for academics. So I left that, and now I do kid life coaching. For those of you who don't know what life coaching is, it is not like therapy. Therapy has its own place, and it deals with trauma from the past and going through all those emotions to try and heal from the past. Coaching is very much focused on the future and helping kids with obstacles that they will face on a day-to-day basis. So what I do is I teach kids little tricks and things that they can implement in their immediate emotions when they're struggling with anger or frustration or whatever, to have little tools that they can lean into to manage those situations better. So I think what's most important to explain, which I think a lot of people don't know, is that children, well, we all have in the emotional brain, we have the amygdala and we have the prefrontal cortex. And the amygdala is our fight, flight, freeze response, which is, I explain it to the kids as being they're a superhero that comes out to fight when they're feeling under pressure. But what we have that kids don't have is we have an amygdala, a prefrontal cortex, which is fully developed. And the kids don't have that. They only have that developed when they are 25. So, you know, that's something to take into consideration in your parenting, is that when your kids do fly off the handle or do have these crazy outbursts of tears or tantrums or whatever it may be, that we bear in mind that they actually don't have that part of the brain that regulates them. So, you know, I hope that helps a little bit in terms of understanding some of the bad behaviors that we have to experience on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so I think everybody's here now. I hope you can all hear me. Just got a lot of black screens. So I hope you're all with me. And then I think if you've got any questions, will you just please put them into the chat, or otherwise raise your hand and I can just click on you and you can ask any questions. But what I want to start by doing is I would like for you to put in the chat box, or for yourself. You don't have to let everybody see, but I'd like you to just take a moment and rate yourself out of 10 what you would consider is where you're at in terms of your parenting, 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. So just take a moment to think about that. And feel free to add it if you would like to. Okay, thanks. Got a 6 and a 5. Okay. 7, thank you. 7. Okay, and then I would like you to rate yourself out of 1 to 10 on how you find your relationship with your child. 10 again being the highest and 1 being the lowest. Okay, thank you. And then lastly, oh, we've got some good numbers here. That's great. And then lastly, I think what is probably the hardest question is to answer how happy are you with you? And that means in terms of your relationship with your spouse or your partner or whatever, in your workplace. Just when you think about yourself, how would you rate yourself out of 10 again? Okay, so there's some good numbers here. That's great to see. And the reason why I'm doing this is I think one of the most important things that we often forget is that our kids are so susceptible to what we are experiencing. And when we are struggling or having a bad day or, work's getting the better of us, those sorts of things, as much as we'd like to believe that we are heroes and we can cover it up for our kids, fighting with your spouse or whatever it is, the kids actually pick up on all of that stuff. And what we've got to remember is that we are, I like to use this image for when I work with my kids, is that, if we're all cups and we've got liquid in us, if we want to make sure that our work happens and our relationships with our spouses and those sorts of things, if we want those things to be successful, we need to have some sort of liquid that flows into the other cups. And if we're not looking after ourselves and taking the time to look after, to nurture our own emotional well-being, then there's nothing in our cups that can flow into our kids and our work and all of those sorts of other things. So starting off by saying, like, really one of the most important things in this parenting journey is to put yourself first. I know it goes against everything that we've been raised to believe or what people say, but if we are not nurturing ourselves and looking after ourselves, then it's borderline impossible to look after our families and specifically our children, because that's what we're here to talk about. So I have a few questions that have come in regarding different issues that parents are facing. But like I said earlier, if there is anything specific that you would like me to cover, please feel free to put it in the chat, and then I can answer it. Or otherwise, put your, if you just put that hand thing up, and then you can chat. Hope you can all see this. So one of the questions that has come up is there I've explained to you about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, where I use these two characters with my kids so that I think what's another thing that's important to mention is so often unintentionally, whether it's teachers or us or, whatever adults there are that are in the children's lives, um, there is sometimes a tendency to say to children, you are horrible, or you are naughty, or those sorts of things, and children internalize that message and they become that message. Whereas when I'm working with the kids, I teach them that they've got these two characters in their brains, that they've got Amy the gorilla, who's the superhero there to protect us, and sometimes she gets a little bit scared and then she acts out, and that helps kids to be able to separate themselves from the behavior, which I find works quite nicely, and you might want to use it. And then obviously I've got Tex, who is sheriff, who, as we know, that I've said to you, is not fully developed in children, but that doesn't stop them from forming habits that, like when they get angry, to take a breath, to take a time out, those sorts of things, to go to the bathroom, whatever it is. But to get those habits in place while the prefrontal cortex is developing. And these characters, obviously, they quite enjoy them. So it's quite useful. Feel free to use them if you want to, but it just helps kids separate from the behavior and thinking that there's something wrong with them. Especially, like I said, when somebody says you are naughty or you are horrible. So there's that if you want to use it. One of the questions that keeps coming up is, how do I get my kids off of the screens? So I think I'd like to start by explaining the damage, because I think that's something that also, we are very good, and I am a single mom, and I have definitely been responsible for using the third parent with my kids. But one of the things that I find more and more with the kids that come to me is that they are all struggling with falling asleep at night. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that blue light exposure that children have actually depletes the melatonin in their brains. And melatonin is what they need to fall asleep. So I normally in my coaching, I always say to the kids, if you're struggling with sleep, please can you make sure that between an hour and half an hour before you go to bed, that you turn the screen off, because that light is still acting, never mind the fact that what they've been watching, that screen flicking and that action that's happening in the screen is actually still being processed in their brains for quite a substantial amount of time afterwards. So turning the screens off at least 30 minutes before definitely helps aid the sort of move into calming down and falling asleep easier. There's also research that says that it can impact the attention, which I recently read a thing about, these kids that I was talking about, the sort of older kids, but that they're watching TikTok, and everything on TikTok is kind of a 30-second picture, and then they flip to the next thing. And the problem with that is that the attention span of these kids is actually reducing, because that's what the brain is being taught is, pay attention for 30 seconds and then you've got to refocus for the next thing. So, and that's obviously impacting their behavior as well. And there is research, it isn't conclusive yet, but there is research in the process at the moment that severe screen use can actually impact the brain structure. So with those things in mind, I think, I'm all for kids watching programs that are age appropriate and at a limited amount of time. But I think, there's a problem at the moment that people handing iPads over to their kids and not actually watching what the kids are watching. And I think, also important to mention is that children can't separate what's happening on a screen to what's happening in reality. So you'll find your little kids will actually move closer to the screen when they're watching, especially if there's outside noise, because they are all consumed by what they are watching. And that can be severely damaging, especially if they're watching something that's not age appropriate, or violence or sexual or any of those sorts of things. So that would also obviously impact their sleep, because they will interpret whatever they've seen as real and then go to bed, and those whatever they've seen is going to play out in their sleep. So I'm all for, like I said, I'm all for letting kids watch stuff, but I would strongly advise that you are watching. These kids are clever. They know how to click on stuff, and it's a rabbit hole where before you blinked, they are watching something completely inappropriate and you didn't even realize because you're busy with something else. So make sure that you lock down the devices with security settings. There is an app that I have discovered. It is paid, but it's called Bark. And Bark, actually, you can set your limits on the devices, and that will actually notify you if your kids have somehow jumped the system and gone into something inappropriate. You would be alerted on your own devices as to what the kids are up to. So it's quite a nice device to have, app to have. But like I said, it is a paid for one. So that's kind of the main thing on screens. If there's anything that anybody would like to ask me, please speak up or put it in the chat. Otherwise I can carry on.
So, Debbie, I just want to find out. So I've got a 7-year-old who's turning 8 soon, and then I've got a 3-year-old. So it's hard to get a balance between, because there's one TV in the house. Now I have to give a cell phone to the little one, but she still gets distracted and actually watches the show that the bigger one is watching. So I don't know how to get the balance between those two.
Yeah, so it's a tough one. But I think there's a place for, the older one gets X amount of time and the little one gets X amount of time, and making space for each other in that. There are, even as a 3-year-old, there are programs that a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old can watch that they will both enjoy. And I think, it's kind of encouraging that sort of stuff. I appreciate that sometimes it's difficult, but I think if you can set sort of clear boundaries for them that says, your sibling is a little bit older than you, so this is their time, and while they're doing that, you can go and play Lego or puzzles or something like that, and the same for the older one. You can say to the older one, if you don't want to watch what your baby sibling is watching, then you're welcome to go and play in your room and do something else, and this is their time. So again, I think it sounds like hard work, and for the first few days it is. But once that and also I believe in visuals. If you can put up a schedule that says at this time it's the little one's turn and at this time it's the older one's turn, and then make it fun that at the end of that there's a joint program that you can both watch together. I found with my kids that often there would be a resistance from one or the other to say, I don't want to watch this. But the minute that it was on, you kind of see them And before you've even, had to put in effort, they've kind of got lost in the program anyway.
Yeah.
I think we have the ability to give them more options than they need. And
Yeah,
and when
definitely.
when we kind of go, look, this is it, they
Mm.
they tend to, I mean, they'll kick up a stink, but
Yeah.
it generally isn't a long lasting one, I
Yeah.
find.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Okay. No, that helps. Thanks.
I've got another question here that said, how young would you say you would let a toddler start watching? Again, I think this is my personal feeling. I think the longer you can keep your kids away from screens, the better. I think there is more than enough time for them to watch screens, and when they're little, they don't if they don't know what they're missing, then they're not going to miss it. So that would be my advice, is that as long as you can keep them away, that would be the ideal, especially based on things that I mentioned with the blue lights and that kind of damage that it can do. But again, if you do want to introduce them to programs, then I would say just make sure that you're limiting the amount of time that they're doing it, and especially limiting it just before bedtime and that sort of thing. I hope that answers the question. Barashni says, so many of the schools send homework either via an app or on YouTube. So it's very contradictory. Yeah. I have the same problem. I have my child also gets all her work sent to her on her laptop, and she's always on there. So I do completely understand that, and obviously I'd love to fight with the schools, but I'm not there yet. But I think if you can limit, again, the best that you can, they've obviously got to do their schoolwork. But if you're able to monitor that they're actually just doing their homework and then they're off, that's always helpful. But again, it's a tough one that individually you have to navigate. And I think, again, leaning into the settings on the devices to make sure that they can't access things that they're not supposed to. And when they finish their homework, there is downtime where they're not on their screens. But yes, I I completely empathize, and I'm in the same boat struggling with that as well. I hope
So
that
Debbie,
helps.
just to add in,
Yes.
when my daughter was, I think, 4 years old, when she was her eyes were tested and she had astigmatism, and at the time she was like the only kid in her preschool that wore spectacles.
Okay.
Now, if I look at the school, and like every second child wears spectacles,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if it's not because of these screens. We're still fortunate they get readers to come home with and read, so it's a physical book. But my 7-year-old niece, who's in grade 1, her reading assignment comes on an iPad.
Yeah.
Uh, so I just find that, like, contradictory. We're trying to promote certain things, and then, I mean, I'm sure, like, if you're starting kids off at 7, unless you're in the home, are forcing them to read a physical book, or not forcing, that's not a nice word. I mean, encouraging them to read a physical book. They're reading off these tablets and things like that, which is putting a huge strain on their eyes.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and I know that there's these blue lens glasses and stuff that, I don't know enough research on them to know if they do actually help. But I do. I agree with you completely. I think with all this research that we have that proves that screens are damaging for kids, that we are having to deal with schools who are putting everything online. And I think you're probably right. I think that a lot of the increase in glasses is the fact that these kids are spending a lot of time. But I have to say that I don't think it's just the schoolwork. I think, like I said, I think there's a lot of third parent happening in homes, and these kids are, especially on holidays. And another one of the subjects that I want to cover is working parent guilt, which when you both having to work all hours of the day and you've got to do it because you've got to pay the bills, it's very easy to just hand the kids an iPad or turn on the TV to keep them entertained. So it's a really hard one, because I think that is also playing into why there's such an increase in children wearing glasses these days. Yeah, I hope that helps. Not really. Is there any more questions? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next. Oh, okay. So this is kind of what I was talking about, and this is something that I've also experienced a lot of with my coaching is parents that are sending their kids to me, and while the kids are with me, expressing how much they are struggling with the fact that they just don't have the time to spend with their kids, and the kids are inevitably sitting on screens and doing all of those different kinds of things. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I think, first of all, I think we all need to just be kind to ourselves and give ourselves a break in terms of the demands that society has put on us and the bills we have to pay and the hours that are expected of us to work, and to just be kind to yourself and not punish yourself. And also I think what's really important to remember is that kids don't need us to be present all the time, especially if we're busy doing something else. If you can take that time to just put your phone down and just be present with them, whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, to just be present in the moment, listening to what they have to say, it can go such a long way. I mentioned earlier that I'm a teacher as well, and one of the things that I noticed quite heavily after COVID as well was kids were coming to me and they just couldn't get enough of me in the interactions that we were having, and it took me a while to work out what it was, but it was actually the fact that I think we as adults have kind of gone so used to the whole COVID thing, where we went from screens and then finish work and you go straight onto the next screen, whether it's TV or your phone or whatever it is, and we in ourselves have become a little bit addicted to the screens, and these kids are kind of going, I'm here, and because we are not putting our own screens down, they're picking them up and modeling us. So I think, if we can just be conscious, whether it's at dinner time, that we sit at the tables with the kids and devices are away, and ask questions, and not questions like, how was your day? Because your teen's going to respond with fine. And that's the end of that conversation. But, little things like, what was your high? What was your low? Just things that'll start, conversations. What did you learn about today? Things that will encourage the kids to start talking to you. Teens, different story. But, if you can find something that they are into, even if it is screens, but you find that angle where you can have a conversation and connect on their level with them, they will open up. And that doesn't need to be 5 hours. That can be 30 minutes. Because if they've had your undivided attention for that period of time, there is an element of, like really like gratification that they've been seen, they've been heard, and that's okay. So just remember the quality, even if with your little kids, if it's taking them to bed just a little bit early and reading a book and then asking them questions about the book, how do you think that character felt? And do you remember the last time you felt that way? Sorry, I'm going to get to teens now, I promise. But I think, if you can meet them at their level, so your little kids, like I said, with storybooks, when there's a story that's might tie into how their day was, then ask them those questions relating to the character. Older kids, find out what they're interested in. It's TikTok, if it's the latest TikTok craze or whatever it is, but if you can connect on their level, then you're going to get their attention and they're going to want to have those conversations with you. Yeah, I think that's pretty much, you can obviously see that screen that I've got up there. If you've got any questions on parent guilt or anything else, how to interact with your kids, you want to ask me anything? This is a questions and answers session. No? Okay, should I move on? Okay, so here we are with the teens. So I think what's the most important thing to understand about our teens is it is genetically in them at the time that they start with the tweens, so from your sort of 12-year-old up to 18, 19. Those kids are genetically designed to start separating from us. There is this built-in need to figure out who they are in the world. So first up, do not take it personally, because they are literally just trying to figure out who they are in this world, because they are not little children anymore. And even the way that we speak to them, we say, you're not little anymore, you can do this, those sorts of things. Work's getting harder for you because you're getting older. Those messages that are we sending to them are being heard, and they are going, actually, I need to figure this out. And that's, never mind the hormones that are pumping through them. There's all kinds of changes that they're internally trying to figure out, which we all know because we were there. But I think sometimes it's hard to remember that. And also, really, when we as parents are just trying to hold on to our little babies that were, it's really hard to let go, because we take it personally and we think that they're actually trying to get away from us, when in fact they're not. It's not a personal attack on us. It's simply them just going, I just need to figure out who I am in the world. And I think, one, most importantly, don't take them personally, and two, don't give up. But when they need their space, respect that and give them their space, but don't disappear. I was chatting to somebody today where we were saying, it's so easy when the teens are playing up to just go, oh, well, if you don't want to talk to me, then fine, I don't want to talk to you either. But that's our ego that's shouting out, because we're feeling hurt, because the children that used to cling to us don't want to cling to us anymore. And what we've got to remember is they're going through something. Don't take this personally, and when they're ready, they will come back. And How do you handle it when you know that some of your child's friends do not necessarily have their best interests at heart? Okay, so this is something I'm quite passionate about. I don't know if any of you know, there's a guy who's very into ADHD and child development and all of that stuff, and his name is Gabor Mate, and he wrote a book called Hold On to Your Kids, and it speaks quite profoundly into this whole friends of teens. And for me, what I have realized is, like I said, don't take them personally and still consistently be there. But also what I've noticed is that when we're talking to our kids, and especially the teens, and they eye rolling us or, acting like they're not listening to us, they really are. And I think what's important when it comes to friends that don't necessarily have their best interests at heart, we have to trust in the values and the morals that we put in place with our kids. That is the foundation of who they are. And while they are figuring themselves out, they are going to have these relationships, but hopefully they will work out that those are not necessarily in their best interests themselves. I think it's important also to not jump on the bandwagon of pointing out the faults in the friends, because I think what that does is it drives our kids further away from us, because there's this element of, you don't understand me, my friend does, and so I'm going to go there. And that's the damage that we don't want to do, because if we do that, then there's a chance that they're going to slip further into that. Whereas if we're just on the outside observing what's happening and just listening, and then when opportunities arise to point out examples of possibly the way we were raised or the way we do things, those messages do sink in, and the kids do listen. And I think those, we have to be so careful in our parenting styles when there are bad influence friends in the mix, especially, like I said, because of the hormones and that whole sort of need to fit in that happens when you're a teen. And if we are pushing against this trend that's happening, we might push our kids away. I hope that makes sense. Does that help, Lana?
Sorry, I'm trying to send a thumbs up now. So
Okay.
if you did, thanks.
Okay, so you good with that?
Yes,
Does
thanks.
that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then also, obviously, like you can see on my screen, is encouraging open communication and being okay with whatever they bring home. Because, if they start talking about, for example, if they start swearing, or they talk about a friend that got drunk at a party, or something that they watched at somebody's house, if we immediately jump to an opinion on that sort of thing, that's going to quite possibly shut down any chance of them talking to us again. And that's the last thing that we want. So as hard as it is, it's really important to encourage open communication. I always say to my kids, I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you are so drunk that you can't even string a sentence together. You phone me, because I'm the one that's going to come and look after you and come and get you. And I'm the one that's going to make sure that you get home safely. And I'm not going to hold that against you, because I want you to speak to me and not do something stupid like get into a car with a friend, or those sorts of things. So it's really, like I said, it's really hard, but it's really important to learn to close your mouth and just listen and observe. And when the opportunity arises, to then have those difficult conversations, but definitely not in the moment where they're losing their minds because you don't want them to go to a party or something. You know, that's, you've got to let them diffuse and then try and reconnect. So I hope that helps. My teen is struggling with self-image, eczema, and is being bullied. Okay. So it's such a hard one when kids have got something that they're struggling with, because children are mean, and they're especially at teen age, they're very good at pushing people out that are different. In terms of her self-confidence, you know, it is a really tough one, but I would encourage again that you have open, honest conversations with her, and try and find the things that she's proud of and the things that she's good at, and just focus in on those things. You know, I always say to my kids that, you know, there's two worlds that they live in. There's the external world, where we can't help what people say and people do, but we've also got the internal world, where if we do everything in our power to build that up, then the other things that happen from the outside don't hurt as badly. So I would really encourage you to make sure that you're having conversations with her, that you are empathizing with her and holding back on telling her how she should feel, but letting her feel her feelings, but at the same time trying to move her to the positives that she does have. I hope that helps. Also, in line with that, and something that I didn't mention, is one of the things that I've also noticed with teens is, again, going back to TikTok, is what they're watching. And if they are spending all their time watching girls in bikinis, girls modeling, or boys, you know, weightlifting and six packs and all of those sorts of things, if that is what they're spending their time and energy on, then they are going to internalize their own messages about themselves, that they're not good enough, that they're not pretty enough, that they're not fit enough. So when you do let your kids play on their devices, please just be conscious of what they're watching, and again, gently just point out what they might be doing to their brains when they are watching all these things that we all know are filled with filters and just a little glimpse of people's lives that is not reality. But the internal message, again, because of the prefrontal cortex not being there, these kids are internalizing this stuff, and it can lead to further feelings of low self-confidence, and worse, you know, it can lead to depression and anxiety and all sorts of things. So just be conscious of that. If you can avoid TikTok, do it, is my opinion. If you can't, just when you're having one of those open conversations with your kids, maybe just point out, like, what are the things that you're paying attention to, and what is the message that you're taking in from those things that you are watching. I hope that helps. Nyakalo, I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yes, it is right.
Okay.
It does help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shem,
The
I'm
kids are
sorry
just so.
about. Sorry?
I'm saying, I've just noticed, especially after the hard lockdown, when kids started getting back to school and integrating, their behavior has just, particularly in her school, the kids just, I don't know, I think as the parents just left the kids to their own devices, you know, lockdown was very
or something very new to all of us, and a lot of parents, trying to juggle working from home, helping kids with homeworks and stuff. So some of the kids actually ended up, I think that's my opinion, started spending a lot more time on the screen, and we lost that bonding family time. So
Yeah.
now when they got back to school, they didn't know how to interact with each other, because I see a lot of bullying ever since the kids came back from the lockdown. And yeah, so my teen, she's quite a softie, so she internalizes everything. That's what I've realized, because
Yeah.
every time when I pick her up from school, every day on the car, in the car, I just listen to all the bullying that happens at school. But yeah.
Yeah, look, I think we're still busy working out the damage that COVID did to us as adults, but mostly kids. If you look at that 2 years in comparison to their lifespan, it's huge, and I think a lot of the necessary milestones that they were supposed to have gone through in terms of interacting in social environments, learning how to interact with their peers. I think a lot of that didn't happen, and they were resorted to sitting in their houses, whether it's their bedroom or their lounge or whatever, on a device. So that interaction that children desperately need and that learn through play that is so important wasn't happening. And I think like I said, I think the results are still out on how severe the damage is. I can say for my little kids that I deal with, there's a huge amount of anxiety that they're facing. And I think, like you said, the older ones, because they missed out on that interaction that they needed, where there's that sort of leveling that happens between the peers, didn't happen. And they're coming in with their own anger and frustration and confusion from what happened. I mean, I, as an adult, still have struggled to put it all together, what happened in those 2 years. So that frustration with kids is going to be even bigger. And I think that's where this bullying is coming from, is it's not necessarily that it's bad kids, it's kids that are angry and confused from missing out on 2 years of their lives. So yeah, I think there's still a long way to go before we can figure out how to help these kids with what happened. Anyway, are there any other questions in terms of teens?
Debbie, what I think is, it's not just you see these mood swings and things with kids, not just with teens. It's pretty much across all ages. They have the times when they just withdraw, they're angry and frustrated, and it it takes a while. Like I know sometimes with my daughter's 9, and there's oftentimes when she withdraws, and I've started teaching her how to journal now. And then it takes her sometimes it takes her a while, and she'll come back and she'll explain, because she's able to verbalize it, but she had to first write it down. um but it takes a while to get into that kind of practice and learn these kinds of skills. But if you look at the bullying thing, as much as people keep putting up the whole zero tolerance on bullying and that kind of thing, and these anti-bullying policies, and I've noticed in many schools and environments, very little is done to actually address it, because people are fearful on how to actually approach it and what to do. And also, if you unpack that bullying at the root cause, you're just finding perhaps it's kids that are really struggling with their
Yeah.
own self-images and inadequacies and things like that. And they're lashing out from a place of anger because maybe they're feeling neglected, not having enough attention, that kind of thing. Because you always find kids, or most of the time, you find with the kids that come from these really loving homes and they get all of the attention and things like that, become easy targets for bullying. Because it's almost like other kids look at them and like, why are you getting all of this and I'm not?
Yeah.
And I've just seen it from a few instances in our schools, in the school that my daughter's in, because I'm on the parent committee. It's not kids from like, where traditionally or stereotypically you'd say from a poor background, or kids that and are coming from single parent households or whatever. It's like really extremely wealthy kids that have nothing to complain about in essence, except for perhaps lack of attention and support at home, that are the ones that are bullying.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with you. As I mentioned in the beginning, I worked in the nonprofit sector for many years and worked with many underprivileged kids. And the transition from there to affluent areas and working with some of those kids was quite terrifying for me, because there is definitely an element of neglect that's happening with the kids. And I think, again, I don't want to point fingers, but it's definitely this what the societal demands of these dual income households, as well as broken homes, where mom's having to work triple the amount of time because she's got to support the kids. So I think what's really scary for me is that there are so many of these bullying policies in place, but none of them really go into understanding the bully. And I think that's a really big problem that needs to be faced, because kids are not born bullies. I mean, obviously, if there's a child that's been in an abusive home, then they might model that behavior. Chances are that child's going to be more subservient than demonstrative, unless they're older. But I think there is a desperate need for understanding what's happening with these kids and why they're behaving the way that they are, because it's definitely an unmet need that they are demanding attention for. So yeah, I think it is definitely something that I am witnessing more and more. And I think, in terms of the kids that are being bullied, I think, again, like I mentioned, with the inner world, is to build that up, and also to not be afraid. If the inside world is nice and strong, then they're less likely to let somebody speak to them badly. There's nothing wrong with standing up for yourself, setting your boundaries. And I think we need to teach our kids that. Because I think there is a place for walk away, but there is a place for stand up and say, don't touch me, don't, speak to me like that. Where those kids are for themselves, are learning to stand up for themselves. But then on the other side is obviously where I think the schools need to kick in more, is helping those kids that are being bullied, because I think the stigma still is parents get called in, your kid's badly behaved, the kid goes home and gets into trouble with the parents as well, and the cycle just keeps going. So yeah, I don't have an answer for that in terms of how to fix the bullies, but I think in terms of kids that are being bullied, it's to just help them build up their own confidence, to know that they can stand their ground, and to do so. I hope that helps. Yeah, okay. You worked out how to put your thumbs up. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the last question that I had, which was good old tantrums and angry outbursts, which actually ties in quite nicely to what we've just been talking about in terms of kids that have got unmet needs. And invariably, children who are having these angry outbursts or having tantrums, I mean, I don't mean your usual 2-year-old tantrums, but even those, I think what's important to remember again is the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex that I spoke about, the Amy and the text, that you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have any rationalization abilities at all. So when a child's needs are not being met, there is going to be that gorilla that comes out because they don't know how else to do it. Also, what's another guy that I'm passionate about is Mark Brackett, who talks about teaching kids words, because we adults, we have the dictionary of emotions. We understand calm, we understand angry, we understand frustrated, we understand embarrassed, and all those different, jealousy, those different things. Kids don't understand all those different emotions, and never mind that, they don't have the words. And we assume that they do. So when children are having angry outbursts or having tantrums or those sorts of things, that is the time when we as parents need to help them, give them the words, so that they next time can say, actually, this is how I feel. And I don't mean next time like immediately. Obviously, it's going to take work. But the more that we introduce emotional vocab to our kids, the more they are going to be able to explain to us how they're feeling. And when they do that, we're better equipped to help them. If they can, instead of saying that they're angry, if they're able to say, I'm really jealous because my sibling got this and I didn't, then we can have those conversations with them. But until they have those words, they're just angry and they're just stamping their feet. And we've got to work out what it is that they need. So I think most importantly, in those moments, as hard as it is, and I know it's hard, but it is important to, I believe, to make sure that your child is safe. Obviously, if they're hurting somebody, you need to get down on their level and say, look, you're not allowed to hurt somebody. But I am a firm believer in not sending kids to their rooms when they're behaving like that. The reason, and please don't kill me, but the reason why is they're already struggling with the feelings that they're having. If we send them away, we're basically saying to them, I love you, but I don't love this version of you. So you're not okay. I don't want you in my space. And that adds to the existing feelings that they already have. And what also results in us sending our kids away when they're behaving badly is that they become crowd pleasers. And I don't know about you, but I have fought for many years to work out of being a people pleaser. I don't want my children to go through that. So when they are having these outbursts, allow them to calm down. Say to them, I can see you're angry. I can see you're frustrated. It's not okay to hurt anybody, but I'm allowing you this time to cool down. And when you're ready, I'm here. And that works so much better. And also, don't try and rationalize and have a conversation with them in the middle of the outburst. Nobody, not even us adults, are listening to rationalization when we are having one of our moments. So there's no point in trying to do it with our kids. So let them calm down. Once they are calm, go back and say, I see that you were really upset, and I understand why you were so upset, because your brother got this toy and you didn't, or whatever the case may be. But that kind of behavior cannot carry on. We need to use our words better, and then introduce words, so that the next time that it happens, there is a potential that that conversation that you had will reoccur, and they'll be able to say, okay, feeling that feeling again, and it's because my sibling took my toy, but it's constantly having those conversations, constantly modeling the behavior, and constantly reassuring them that their feelings are okay, that there's not something wrong with them, that they're suddenly some monster from a different planet. Yeah, I think if we can just acknowledge that in those moments it's because they desperately are needing something that we're not acknowledging or seeing or understanding, and to be able to just go, okay, what is it that they're asking for, instead of pushing them away, bringing them closer, if that makes sense. Questions? Shout at me, disagree with me. Okay, so here's the question: allowing them to calm down. Do we just ignore the behavior and do nothing for 5 minutes or however long it takes for them, and then talk to them, or do we give reassuring words during the time? So again, if it's obviously dependent on the situation. If they are hurting somebody like their siblings, then it is important to remove them from the situation, or remove the sibling. You don't want them hurting themselves, and you don't want them hurting somebody else. So in that situation, I would get down on their level and say, listen, I can see that you're angry, but it's not okay to hurt anybody. We are going to step away from you to allow you to calm down. And when you are ready, then we can have a conversation. So it's ignoring the behavior. It's a tricky one, because again, there is a need that's not being met. And what I would say is to say, look, I can see that you're really angry. I'm going to allow you to calm down, so that when you're a little bit calmer, you can tell me what it is that you want. Then you've acknowledged that there is something that they want, but you're not condoning the behavior. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, I hope that was okay, cool. Okay, so it's just, so in any of those situations, obviously, like I said, first and foremost, remember they do not have a prefrontal cortex. So crazy behavior that is happening in front of you is purely because they just don't have the tools. Secondly, make sure that you stay calm, because it doesn't help if we jump in. And then to acknowledge the behavior, but to say, I cannot have a conversation with you until you are calm, and allow them to calm down, and then say, I see that you were angry. I see that you were upset about this. Let's talk about it, because that kind of behavior is not okay. If you want something, you need to ask me. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.